When I found the lipstick mark deliberately left as a demonstration on my first love husband's shirt, I knew that the sincere young man who loved me more than his own life, and was willing to offer his hundreds of millions of family fortune in my past life was gone. I should have been his first love who passed away early. After miraculously recovering, we had our happily ever after as we wished, and were sweet for a few years. But now, there is a hot-tempered little secretary by his side. The little secretary would seemingly inadvertently send back my drunk husband, and then casually declare her sovereignty to me, sister-in-law. Take good care of President Leo. He doesn't listen to me. Next time, I will definitely give him a good talking to. I thanked her inferently, as if I knew nothing. My drunk husband muddledly leaned in to kiss me. I love you. I remained indifferent and deftly dodged. The next day, Hudding so sealed my obsession. When my husband sobered up, I handed him a document, "Let's get a divorce." After seeing the words, "divorce agreement," he finally panicked. When I found out that Leo had cheated, I was unusually calm. In my imagination, if such a thing happened, I should be screaming hysterically and then urgently seeking an answer from Leo. But now I don't have any extra feelings. The lipstick mark still remains on the shirt in my hand. I can't tell if Leo forgot to wipe it off or if someone outside deliberately left it to provoke me. I threw the shirt, together with all the dirty clothes, into the washing machine and calmly pressed the start button. That night, I sat on the sofa in the living room, waiting for Leo to come back as usual. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he stumbled and rang the doorbell reeking of alcohol. I opened the door, and the secretary with delicate makeup was supporting him. I took Leo and nodded slightly at the secretary. "Sister-in-law, President Leo drank too much tonight. I'm sorry. I couldn't stop him." "It's okay. You've worked hard too. Go back quickly." I smiled, indicating that it was all right, and pushed away Leo's head that was leaning on my shoulder. "Sister-in-law, take good care of President Leo. Drinking too much is bad for the stomach. He doesn't listen to me. Next time, I will definitely give him a good talking to." The secretary's gaze swept over my arm holding Leo, and she assured me with great certainty. The enthusiasm of young people is easily stirred up, and her words are full of possessiveness and concern. "Leo is not light. Have you had a hard time carrying him all the way?" I looked at her slender figure and said softly. She was obviously stunned. I closed the door in front of her and casually reminded her, "You've rubbed your heel until it's bleeding. Remember to put some medicine on it when you get home." And Annie had already gone to bed. I helped Leo lie down on the sofa in the living room and went to the kitchen to cook a bowl of sobering-up soup for him. "Leo, drink the sobering-up soup." I supported him and brought the bowl to his mouth. Leo lifted his eyelids and looked at me blankly. It took him a while to recognize who I was. "Wife." He buried his face in my neck, his movements skillful and natural. "Leo, drink the soup first. Leo, don't be willful." I was particularly patient. Only then did he move away from me and, with my help, drank the sobering-up soup mouthful by mouthful. Then he tried to lean in again, but I subtly avoided him and took the bowl to the kitchen. When I came out, Leo had already fallen asleep on the sofa. I ignored him and turned to enter the bedroom. "Hello?" Early the next morning, Leo was woken up by the ringing of his mobile phone. I stood at the door of the bedroom and heard it clearly. The moment he heard the voice on the other end, his tone softened. "Just like he used to be with me." How ridiculous. Just like he used to be with me. "It's okay. I'm fine." As he spoke, he put on his shoes and walked towards the balcony with his mobile phone in hand. "Cecilia cooked a sobering-up soup for me. My head doesn't hurt now." His voice gradually faded away. I held the document in my hand, walked out, and placed it on the coffee table. "Madam, you're up?" The nanny had just finished watering the flowers in the garden and asked me with the watering can in her hand. "Yes," I said. "Then I'll bring out the breakfast. Remember to eat it with Sir," she said. "Aunt Lou, thank you for your hard work." "Madam, one bum. After all these years. You're still so polite." She smiled, turned around, and entered the kitchen to serve the prepared breakfast. Leo hung up the phone and came in from the balcony. He saw the document on the table at a glance. I smiled and looked up. Leo. Let's get a divorce. Why? Leo's expression suddenly became flustered. And he quickly walked up to me. Why? Cecilia? What are you talking about? The lipstick mark. You didn't cover it up. I pointed to his collar and still smiled. Leo was taken aback and hurriedly explained. I was drunk last night. I don't know who rubbed it on my collar. Cecilia. You have to believe me. How could I betray you? You're the person I like the most. We've been married for 5 years already. Right. Cecilia. Even well-crafted lies have loopholes. Let alone lies that Leo made up on the spot. The lipstick mark on your collar is the same shade as the one she wore last night. I said slowly. And many times. There were also such marks on the clothes you took off. Leo. I don't want to go through each and every incident with you. In short. Let's get a divorce. Leo's face was filled with shock. I got up and was about to go to the dining table to have a meal. But he suddenly grabbed my wrist. Cecilia. I was wrong. Let's not get a divorce. Okay? I'll break up with her right away. He raised his finger and swore. Sounding sincere. I've already asked Snow to book a flight ticket to City A. I said. She'll come to pick me up soon. As I spoke, I shook off Leo's hand and walked to the dining table to have my breakfast. He still stood there in a daze. His eyes blank. Not knowing what he was thinking. I pulled out the suitcase from the bedroom and stood at the door. Leo. Remember to sign the divorce agreement. Leo's gaze overlapped with mine from a distance. And he asked me, Cecilia. Don't you want me anymore? It's not that I don't want you anymore. I said. All these years. It should be considered that I stole this time. There has to be retribution for stolen things. Doesn't there? My nose felt a bit sour. So I quickly turned around and walked out of the house where I had lived for 5 years. Madam. Where are you going? Aunt Lou was weeding in the yard and suddenly saw me walking out with a suitcase. I looked at her and smiled. Saying, I'm going on a trip and won't be coming back. Snow's car stopped in front of me. I put the suitcase in the trunk and turned around just in time to see Aunt Lou who had followed. I've divorced Leo. I said. Aunt Lou looked at me in disbelief. And Leo, who was walking towards us, also stopped in his tracks. I got into the passenger seat of Snow's car, closed the door, and left without looking back. Are you willing to divorce Leo? Snow asked me. You suddenly asked me to book a flight ticket last night and asked me to pick you up this morning. What exactly happened? Snow. Thank you for your hard work. I said. There's no such thing as being willing or not. He's no longer the person I like. Snow sighed and asked me. Then don't you think it's a big loss that you paid so much? There always has to be a price to pay. I said. I looked out the window. One house after another receded in front of my eyes. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the car window. Distant memories suddenly welled up in my heart. And the chirping of cicadas in the hot summer filled my ears. That year. Outside the window. The scorching sun was baking the earth. And the chirping of cicadas exploded in the air like boiling water. But my hospital room was very cold. So cold that there was no trace of the smell of sunshine. I leaned against the head of the bed, my fingertips clamped by the testing instrument, and an infusion bottle hanging at the head of the bed. The liquid was slowly flowing into my body through the catheter. I sat on the hospital bed, looking at the scene outside the window in vain. Cecilia. I've come to see you. The door of the ward was pushed open. I turned my head. And the young man with black hair carried a fruit basket and walked to my bedside with ease and sat down. Cecilia. See what you want to eat today. Leo sat on the bench and smiled at me. Whatever you want to eat. I'll wash it for you. Leo, did my grandpa and the others tell you what kind of illness I have? I asked Leo. I asked them. But they didn't want to tell me. Cecilia doesn't have a serious illness. The doctor said that you can be discharged from the hospital soon. Leo looked at me. And his expression was as bright as ever. He said it with great certainty. Looking at Leo's smile, I suddenly really felt that I could live for a long time. Is that so? Then when I'm discharged from the hospital, will you prepare a gift for me? I looked at Leo. But it's okay if there's no gift. You must come to pick me up. Leo smiled and stretched out his hand. Hooked my little finger, which was the only one not controlled by the instrument, and said seriously, I will prepare a guest and will definitely come to pick you up. Promise? Promise. The air conditioning in the hospital suddenly didn't seem so unbearable. Leo washed an apple for me, cut it into small pieces, and brought it to my mouth. He didn't tell me at that time that he had prepared a proposal ring and planned to propose to me on the day I was discharged from the hospital. But he didn't have the chance to give that pair of rings either. I died in the warmest season of the year. The chirping of cicadas in the midsummer became my last elegy. On an ordinary afternoon, my soul floated in the air. I listened to the sharp alarm sound of the instruments in the ward. Groups of people came in and out. My body was wheeled into the operating room and then out again. There were cries in the room. I stood in front of my grandparents, parents, and all I could do was watch them. My Cecilia. My Cecilia. My Cecilia was so sensible. Why is the heavens so unfair? Grandpa held my arm, which was already full of needle holes, and cried like a fragile glass product. Father. Cecilia is gone. Cecilia. My father tried to pull my grandpa, but halfway through his words, he couldn't hold back his sobs. My mother held my father's hand and cried uncontrollably. My grandmother wiped her tears one after another, and her gray hair trembled under the light. Leo rushed back from school in a hurry. He had just finished his last intensive foreign language class. When he arrived at the hospital, there were beads of sweat on his forehead. Cecilia. He looked at the messy ward in confusion, and his eyes swept over everyone present. What happened to Cecilia? He walked up to my dad with a trembling voice and asked him, Uncle, what's wrong with Cecilia? My dad wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, patted Leo on the shoulder, and then pointed at me lying on the hospital bed. His voice was hoarse from crying. Go and take a look at her. Tonight. We're going to send her to the funeral home. As he spoke, he couldn't help but choke up again. Leo walked up to me. My grandfather was still holding my arm. He looked at my face and suddenly knelt down in front of the hospital bed. Tears unexpectedly fell onto my cold arm. Cecilia. Didn't we agree to wait until you were discharged from the hospital? I've even prepared a gift for you. He took out a small box from his arms. When he opened it, there was a pair of beautiful pure silver rings inside. Leo stared blankly at the pair of rings, and tears kept sliding down his cheeks. I don't know when there was no one left in the ward. Leo wiped his face, took out the women's ring from the ring box, and carefully put it on my already cold ring finger. Then he took my hand and solemnly kissed the ring. My soul should have had no feelings at all, but at that moment, I suddenly felt a hint of burning on my ring finger. And my body was sent to the funeral home according to the normal process. Embalmed, cremated, and then turned into a box of ashes, which was held in my dad's hands. They held a very small funeral for me, and only relatives and my very good friends were invited. My dad handed the ashes to Leo, and then he just held the last bit of my weight, staying quiet and not saying a word. When it was time to bury me in the grave, he suddenly lost control and hugged my ashes tightly in his arms, unwilling to let me be buried. Leo, had him fulfilled my obsession. Let Cecilia rest in peace. Don't make things difficult for everyone. My best friend Snow patted him on the back. Only then did he come back to his senses in a daze and put the urn into the grave. Then the soil was filled in, the tombstone was erected, and condolences were paid. Later, almost everyone had left, but Leo was still standing in front of my tombstone, motionless. My dad walked over and sighed, Leo, go home now. Cecilia wouldn't want you to be like this either. Leo seemed not to have heard. My dad patted him again and reminded him. Seeing that he didn't move, my dad shook his head with a sigh and walked away. It was not until the night grew darker, a dark cloud drifted over from the horizon, and then it suddenly rained heavily without warning. Only then did Leo move. He murmured to himself, is that so? Do you also think that someone like Cecilia shouldn't have died? I wanted to pull him away and make him stop standing in the rain. Leo, Dobazar. Go back quickly. Leo, Leo. You'll catch a cold. My voice and my sense of touch disappeared from this world along with the loss of my life. I could only watch Leo in vain. seeing him get drenched in the rain and become depressed. And I couldn't do anything about it. Leo. Go back quickly. I cried out loudly. And my fingertips passed through Leo's body once again. Leo couldn't hear my shouting. He slowly squatted down, hugged my tombstone, and pressed his face against it. Cecilia. If you can't come back to life, what should I do? He leaned against my tombstone, and the raindrops fell on his pale and handsome face. I couldn't tell if he was crying or not. Cecilia. That day, Leo stayed in the cemetery until it closed before leaving, dragging his wet body away. And he had a high fever, which lasted for 3 days. Everyone in Leo's family was extremely worried, fearing that he would never recover from this illness and leave this world just like me. As for me, I don't know why I didn't encounter the underworld messengers who were supposed to fetch my soul. And I'd been lingering in the mortal world. I stood by Leo's bedside and gently placed my hand on the back of Leo's hand. Leo, can you get better soon? I said softly, even though I knew he couldn't hear me at all. Leo seemed to sense something. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked in the direction where I was. For a moment, I even thought he could see me. But Leo didn't say anything, just gave a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth. He propped himself up and sat up, throwing the only remaining men's ring on the bedside table into the drawer. Perhaps because there was some movement in the room. The nanny quickly pushed the door open and asked Leo with concern, "Little master. How are you? Are you feeling better?" Leo nodded and then said nothing more. The next day, Leo was already better, full of energy, having fulfilled my psi. And he didn't look like someone who had just recovered from a serious illness at all. I opened my eyes and found that Snow's car had already driven a long way out of the accommodation area. I accidentally fell asleep. Maybe I didn't sleep well last night, I thought. Snow's car just drove onto the bridge, and the wide river surface suddenly filled my field of vision. You're awake. Snow glanced at me. Did you have a nightmare? Your lips are pale. I shook my head. No. I dreamed about the past. I dreamed about what happened in my last life. Was Leo's love for me real? I've thought about it more than once. It must have been love. Someone who doesn't love wouldn't be hysterical after my death, and wouldn't hold my tombstone and get drenched in the rain until he had a high fever. But that was something from my last life. My throat felt bitter, and the view of the river gradually faded from my sight. Leo. Where did things go wrong that we ended up like this? When we arrived at the airport, Snow handed me my luggage. Thank you, Snow, I said. She shook her head to indicate it was okay. If you want to come back or want me to visit you, remember to call me. Okay. I smiled and agreed. Just as I was about to board the plane, Leo called me. Cecilia. When will you be back? I'll be waiting for you at home. There was a hint of cautious flattery in his voice. Leo. I called his name. I won't come back again. Because I've already come back to look for you. I originally didn't plan to leave. But Leo, this time you left first. I deleted and blocked Leo's number, leaving myself with no way back. City A is a famous tourist city, and there are industries under my grandfather's name there. I dragged my luggage and walked into a homestay. The landlady looked at me friendly. Are you Cecilia? Yes. It's me, I said. She immediately came out from behind the service counter, holding a key in her hand. Then come with me. The old master has arranged the house in the back mountain for you. Okay. Thank you for your trouble, I said. The landlady took me to the house in the back mountain. I went in and took a look. When I opened the window of the main room, I could see the overlapping mountains. Below the mountains was a calm river, flowing slowly, and nearby was a continuous lawn, planted with white flowers of an unknown kind. After the landlady left, I brewed a pot of tea and walked to the window to enjoy the scenery. Not far away, someone was taking wedding photos. The photographer was carrying large cameras and looking for angles in various places. The bride was on the arm of the groom, with a sweet smile on her face. Maybe it was because the scene reminded me of something. But I thought of the day when I took wedding photos with Leo again. It was also such a gentle, but not too hot sun. The sunlight shone on his hair. He was wearing a suit and walked slowly towards me from the sunlight, looking as wonderful as a prince in a fairy tale. So, Miss Cecilia, would you like to marry me? I looked at him in the sunlight and couldn't help but smile. Yes, I would. Mr. Leo. We took the wedding photos very early. We had already taken them when we got engaged. Now that I think about it, maybe the way Leo was in front of me in my last life left such a big psychological shadow on me that I was so eager to tie myself to him, afraid that he would disappear the next moment. But for something like love, how can it work just by tying each other down? In my last life, when Leo spent his entire life and all his money to pray for my next life, did he expect such a result? Leo was completely recovered, not looking like someone who had just recovered from a serious illness at all. He went to class, participated in competitions, and conducted research as usual, just as if I hadn't left. Leo had excellent grades at school and successfully got recommended for postgraduate studies at the same university. After graduation, he naturally joined his family's company. Leo's father asked him to start from the grassroots level and follow the promotion path of an ordinary employee. Leo was very ambitious. He managed to rise from an employee to the general manager in just 4 years. Leo's father confidently handed the company over to Leo. But only I knew that he always couldn't fall asleep all night long, often stared blankly in a certain direction, and always called out my name in his dreams at midnight. But I was clearly by his side, yet he couldn't see me. But I was clearly by his side, yet I couldn't give him any help. Benefactor. The marriage knot needs to be prayed for by 2 people. The master in the temple looked at Leo with the embarrassed expression and kindly advised him. My wife has passed away, and I want to pray for the next life with her. Leo said. The master was taken aback for a moment, then sighed and handed the red ribbon to Leo. Benefactor. Write your names on these 2 ribbons. Okay. Thank you. Leo hung the marriage knot on the treetop, put his hands together, and bowed piously. I looked at Leo and then at the marriage knot. I walked up to it, imitated Leo by putting my hands together, and bowed. I hope that in the next life, I can still meet Leo. If there really are gods 3 feet above our heads, then gods. This is the biggest wish of my life. Time passed quickly. When I left, Leo was only 22 years old. Now, he is almost 40 years old. I've been following him for 18 years. Even though Leo doesn't know it at all. If I hand over all my money and good luck, will she have a long and worry-free life in her next life? Leo sat on the cattle reed and asked the Taoist in front of him seriously. He has visited many temples over the years, and almost all his prayers are related to me. The Taoist priest guarantees that the person you love will have a long and worry-free life in the next life. Okay. Leo smiled. I'll give it all to you. He took out the equity transfer contract and was about to sign it. Leo. I shouted. He has gone crazy and obsessed for my sake. He is willing to jump into such an obvious trap without hesitation. Leo. He's lying to you. I shouted loudly. I thought that this time, just like all the previous times, Leo wouldn't be able to hear my voice at all. But Leo suddenly looked over in shock. After our eyes met, he almost scrambled to get up and then rushed over to pull me into his arms. Leo. I actually touched him. Cecilia. I miss you so much. Leo held me, and his scorching body temperature was transmitted to me through the fabric of our clothes. I really miss you so much. Every word was filled with affection. I really wanted to cry. But as a soul, I couldn't shed tears. The Taoist priest over there looked at us in shock, then scrambled to gather his things and left the room. Ghost. I heard his scream outside the house, and let out a slight sigh of relief. Thankfully, Leo wasn't deceived. At the same time, a voice sounded in the air. But Leo didn't react. It seemed that only I could hear it. I thought that this must be the force that had kept me in the mortal world. I'll give you a chance to start over. But you have to pay some price. Are you willing? I am willing. Without thinking, I agreed immediately. Looking at Leo who was holding me, I replied softly, no matter what the price is, I'm willing to bear it. He had done so much for me and endured so much hardship for so many years. I didn't want him to suffer any longer. If there is an afterlife, can I make up for him properly? Leo's arms holding me were still trembling, and I could feel the cherish he had for me. No matter what the price? The voice in the air let out a laugh. Okay. My consciousness woke up again. And the ear-piercing alarm sound was in my ears. The nurses were gathered around me, about to send me to the operating room. But they suddenly found that the readings on the instruments were gradually returning to normal. What's going on? I don't know. I've never heard of this before. The shocked voices in my ears replaced the alarm sound of the machine. I opened my eyes and smiled at the nurse closest to me. The patient is awake. Call the doctor quickly. The doctor rated the data on my body and was amazed to find that everything was developing in a good direction. It's a medical miracle, little sister, he said. The activity of the cells suddenly increased. And they are fighting the disease well for you. You have to work hard. The probability of getting better is very high. I knew the reason. But I still smiled at the doctor. Thank you, doctor. I will. My illness healed like a miracle. The nurses in the hospital all said that I had climbed out of the coffin. My family was also very happy. And the terrifying scene from my previous life never appeared again. But when I saw Leo again, the beating speed of my heart involuntarily quickened. Cecilia, you'll be discharged from the hospital soon. The young man carried fruits and walked into the ward with a smile. God has eyes. Our Cecilia, such a good little girl, of course should live well. But suddenly my nose became sour. And my eyes turned red in an instant. Cecilia, why are you crying? He was taken aback. Quickly came over to hug me. And patted my back. It's okay. Isn't the illness about to get better? No, defiant, I just miss you so much, I said softly. He patted my back. And his smiling voice came from above my head. I was kept by the tutor to work on a project after school and it was too late. I'm sorry I'm late. Yes. It had only been a day. But I hadn't seen you like this for almost 20 years. I lay in Leo's arms, feeling this hard-won reunion. 3 months later, I was successfully discharged from the hospital. Leo prepared a proposal ring and proposed to me in the ward. I agreed to him. And my family and friends all recognized our relationship. The year Leo graduated, we held an engagement ceremony. I chose a meadow full of flowers and asked Leo to accompany me to take wedding photos. The photos taken at the engagement are so beautiful. What will we do when we get married? Snow sat aside and teased me with a smile. When we get married, Cecilia will definitely be even more beautiful. Leo came over and put his arm around me. The love in his eyes was even hotter than the sunshine that day. We'll take wedding photos twice, he said. Theft. A henpecked husband, Snow said distaphonially. I looked at them and couldn't help but laugh. The photographer over there was calling us. So I pulled Leo and Snow and walked over quickly. Leo said that we would take wedding photos twice. But the day before we got the marriage certificate, he was still working overtime in the company until late at night. In the end, at our wedding, we still used the few photos taken at the engagement. Didn't you say we would take them twice? Snow said dissatisfied lie. He's too busy. These photos are also very beautiful. You just spoil him. Cecilia, I've never seen you treat me this well. Okay. I treat you well too. All right. All right. You're so love-struck. I won't scold you. I held a pillow and looked at the wedding photo hanging in the living room, sighing softly. Because he had once sacrificed so much for me, I could trust him without reservation. I always thought like this until Leo forgot our wedding anniversary for the first time. He came back reeking of alcohol that day. And it was his business partner who sent him back. I took him from the other person's hands and apologized repeatedly. It's okay. Sister-in-law. President Leo drinks like there's no tomorrow. You should also persuade him more. I understand. I'm sorry to trouble you. Leo fell on me. I patted him. And he directly hugged me tightly. I stumbled a couple of steps and was finally trapped between the door and him. Leo, wake up, I said. He didn't seem to hear me. Instead, he leaned in and gently kissed my face. My heart skipped a beat. And I looked up at him. Wife. He gently kissed my lips. And I kissed him back. And so the day passed naturally. A week later, Leo suddenly gave me a bag. I asked him in confusion why. It's a third wedding anniversary gift. I forgot to give it to you. Leo said. I suddenly realized that he had really forgotten that day. I had thought. I put away the bitterness in my heart and smiled at him. I like it very much. Thank you. Husband. Leo put his arm around my shoulder. And I smelled the perfume scent of a woman on him. Husband. Did you change your perfume? I asked casually, pretending not to care. No. Oh. I nestled obediently in Leo's arms. Acting as usual. It should just be that he accidentally rubbed against someone. I thought. Now that I think about it, Leo had gradually changed since then. I had just been deceiving myself all the time. Constantly telling myself that Leo was still the same young man from my previous life. The one who loved only me. The one who prayed to gods and Buddhas for me and almost risked everything for me. But I had never thought that maybe some things are best left unobtained. Leo came to find me. He stood outside the door, looking exhausted. And there were dark circles under his eyes that couldn't be hidden. Can I come in? Yes. I took out a pair of slippers from the shoe cabinet and placed them at Leo's feet. These are my grandpa's. Just make do with them. Leo didn't respond. He just silently changed his shoes and walked in. I went to the kitchen to boil a pot of tea, placed it on the coffee table, and poured a cup for him. The air was very quiet. I didn't say anything. And neither did Leo. The company must be very busy. Right? Won't there be any problems if you run over here like this? I still spoke up and asked him calmly. Cecilia. The things on your side are more important. Leo. If you had said this 5 years ago, I would have been very happy. He seemed to think of something. And a pained expression appeared on his face. Cecilia. I know I broke my promise. But at that time, I was really busy. What about now? Aren't you busy anymore? I asked him with a smile. Leo was momentarily at a loss for words. And the room fell silent again. Leo had a low sigh. You could have just told me that you were busy. I said. But you chose to suddenly call me and tell me that you were busy and couldn't make it when I had already tried on the wedding dress and was waiting for you full of anticipation. No, Cecilia. He was making a feeble defense. And I listened to him quietly. I was really busy. But I believed that you were busy. Leo. What I'm angry about is that you just left things unfinished. Why don't you understand? Leo? I know you were busy. I said. Leo. You were busy when we got married. Aren't you busy now? Yes, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. I'm busy. But. You finally realized that I would leave you? But. You found that your sense of security wasn't reliable. Leo was speechless. He lowered his head. And his voice carried a hint of pleading. I was wrong. Cecilia. Can you forgive me? Leo. Opportunities don't come again and again. Leo looked up at me and promised firmly. There won't be a next time. Cecilia. I knew he didn't understand. Leo. What? If I said that my illness getting better wasn't a miracle, what would you think? I smiled bitterly. It was a reunion that I had been waiting for 18 years for. Leo's expression froze on his face. And there was a hint of genuine confusion in his eyes. Once, after I died, someone prayed to gods and Buddhas. Searched for immortals. And for my sake, he almost visited all the temples across the country and asked all the gods. I said. He prayed for my afterlife. For a long life. And almost exchanged everything he had. So I made a deal with the gods. I wanted to go back to the turning point of the story. And I wanted to treat him well with the rest of my life. Because I knew he loved me. So I could trust him without reservation. I said that if there were gods 3 feet above our heads, then this was my greatest wish in this life. But the person who made the wish with me had long since died in the past 18 years. It took Leo a long time to digest my words. But he just held me and repeatedly said the 3 words, I'm sorry. Do you know that there are always lipstick marks on your shirt? Leo's voice suddenly stopped. I reached out and pushed him away. If she were of the same age as me, maybe she could have hidden it well. But she was very young. But she likes you. And she's so young. When you're young, you always can't wait to declare your sovereignty to the whole world. When she came to see me, she was wearing the pair of high heels you gave me last year. just like when we were at school. I always put my hair tie on your wrist. Because I wanted to tell everyone that I was the one you liked. I stood up and walked towards the bedroom. Finally, having fulfilled my anxiety, I stopped at the door and took a look at Leo. President Leo has sat here long enough. Please go back early. I closed the door, shutting Leo out. I don't know how long it had passed, but I heard the sound of the main door closing. I thought Leo must have left. My body, which had been healthy for a few years, started to deteriorate again. The voice in the air asked me, "Do you regret it? Do I regret it? I should probably regret it. Right? But I've said it before. That was the choice I made. And there are some costs that I should bear." Let's no saw me again. I was already very ill. And it was even difficult for me to sit up. You fool. You. She sat by my bedside crying. I told you not to be so infatuated with love. I barely placed my hand on the back of hers and smiled at her. I know. He gave up everything for you. As she said this, she couldn't hold back her tears again. But if all of that was true, why did you two end up like this? Yeah. Why? Perhaps this is the butterfly effect caused by tampering with time. And it's another possible outcome that the parallel world originally had. It's okay, I said with difficulty. I'll still live for a long time. But what kind of life is this? Snow hugged me. And her body shook with sobs. This was the deal I made with the gods. He brought me back to life. But he tied my life to Leo's. If Leo and I no longer loved each other, then I would spend 18 years in a hospital bed. I once thought this was a curse that couldn't possibly come true. But now I'm lying in the hospital bed, my body constantly being tortured. And I can't sleep all night because of the pain. Just like in my last life. Trapped between the 3 feet of the hospital bed by medical devices. I can't lie and I can't die. I'm going to be trapped in this hospital room for a full 18 years. Those were the 18 years I spent with Leo. The 18 years I spent with Leo, who loved me so much. I was terminally ill. But my grandfather, who loved me the most, died before me. The wheels of fate kept turning. When I was 36 years old, my beloved grandfather passed away of natural causes. And my grandmother couldn't bear it and followed him soon after. So my parents held a grand funeral for them. I was wheeled to this scene in a wheelchair and immediately saw Leo, who was blocked outside. In my last life, my father was willing to hand my ashes to him. In this life, he couldn't even enter the funeral of my grandparents. Cecilia, if you're not feeling well, we'll go back early. My mother pushed my wheelchair and said worriedly. I shook my head. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and I felt dizzy from time to time. But I still managed to get through the whole funeral. It turns out that attending the funeral of an important person is such a sad thing. It's like cutting off the last trace of the bond with him in this world. But perhaps it's precisely because of this that the memories seem more profound. I took a look at Leo, who was sitting outside the venue from a distance. So without these memories, you're no longer the you I knew? I murmured to myself. What's wrong? Snow walked up to me and covered me with a blanket. Nothing. Let's go back. I smiled at her. As the days passed, the 18 years that I had been lingering on in the hospital bed were finally coming to an end. My parents' hair had turned gray. They came to my hospital room. And the sadness in their eyes couldn't be hidden. Cecilia, after all this time, why do you still have to leave us first? I'm unfilial, making you bear the pain of losing a child in your 60s. I'm sorry. The medical staff covered my body. And my parents were sobbing uncontrollably. Just like in my last life. Now, do you regret it? The voice in the air asked again. No. I don't regret it. I said. But I'm sorry for them. I had already accepted the price of tampering with time. The pain brought by this price shouldn't be borne by others. So this sense of guilt is also something I should bear. You agreed so readily back then. You really were still a child. The voice in the air said. But I don't regret seeing him again. Only by experiencing it all over again can I understand more deeply why he loved me so much. Right? You really are something. The voice laughed softly. Well, the punishment is over. And you can go now. My consciousness gradually faded away. But this time, I didn't have anything particularly worth lingering on. The things I was attached to had already died many years ago. So this time, I really should go. I finally understood. The reason why first love is called first love is precisely because it's something that's within sight but beyond reach. And once it falls into the dust, it's nothing. Sooner or later, it will turn into a stubborn grain of rice glue that lingers. In the last sec, and before my consciousness completely dissipated, I heard the voice in the air say, "Go to sleep, child." "Okay. Good night," I replied.